we said, I'm Martin Woodward. In this morning's panel, we're going to be joined by our esteemed group of panelists who said they were all speaking yesterday. So if you haven't had time to watch their sessions yet, then I strongly encourage you to go back and take a look. Don't worry, you can stay here, enjoy this panel first. All the conversations are going to be relevant to you, but definitely to go back and take a look at their sessions. They're excellent. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves by, just quickly saying names, what they work on. So first of all, let's talk to Yael Gutman. Yael.
Hi, thanks for having me. I've been in the product space for around 20 years, started in marketing and moved to project and then product management, and really been focusing on user research for, I'd say, the last 8 years. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're excited to have you. And next up, we have Erica Jorgensen from Microsoft.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I am Erica Jorgensen. I'm a senior content designer at Microsoft, also a manager, and I've been in product space also about 15 years. Started off in journalism, but have been at Microsoft about 4 years. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, thank you. And then last but very, very not much least, we have Guppy Alawaya. So Guppy, fantastic to have you on. Why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Martin. So I'm Guppy Alawaya, Senior Design Program Manager at Dropbox. I've been in the operations space for about 15 years, started in theater operations, have worked for nonprofits with engagements at Google, and very excited to be here and talk to you folks.
Well, thanks very much. So first of all, just me personally, I just have to stand a little bit. I wanted to say how much I enjoyed all of your sessions around user research. In particular, I loved how you sort of were really honest and, told stories about mistakes you've all made. And this was a common theme across all your sessions, about mistakes you've made, about mistakes the organizations have made. But then, what was great, it was how you learned quickly from them and then improved and, tried to continuously improve. So, yeah, in particular, you had a really, a very, very open story about biases that your team had taken into, this research study, and how you found out where you were kind of using data to validate your research, prove points you wanted to go in there and prove, rather than really actively confronting your biases and continuously testing those biases you were saying, which is really good. Do you want to explain a little bit in particular about that example, and then how you and your teams kind of actively challenge your biases when you're looking at data, especially around user research?
Yeah, I think that being open and objective is part of the persona that definitely any research person has to have, and also product. But we're all human, and I think that we're sometimes blind to what's actually going in internally, and so we don't realize that we're actually being influenced by our biases, and we don't even realize we have biases. I mean, that's the definition of it. So it's really important to have these strategies so that we can continually make sure that when we come to any discovery engagement or any research, that we are really open to receiving the information and analyzing it as it comes in without interpreting it based on what we're coming from home with, so to speak. And in our example, there were so many things that just happened at the same time. There was a project that we were asked to look into, and the head of the product team had already, done a project there. And the story in the team was that we've already dealt with this issue, we've solved it, and so we have to look into it, but there isn't really a story there. And that just happened to be that the reporting team, we didn't realize it at the time, but we weren't really considering them knowledgeable enough on the website. It was the customer service team, and I don't think we really understood how well they knew the website and the users. And we sort of thought, they're on the site, people are calling them in, so they're not really sure what's going on the website. So I think these two things sort of happened together, and it was a terrible storm. And we used data to validate the story we already had in our head. So instead of just, and I think that's really important, when you have data, that doesn't mean that you know how to interpret it, because you can make a story go each and every way. And it's really important to be true to what the data is telling us. And I think in our example, we took from the data what we needed in order to validate the story we already had. And then that culminated in a solution that didn't solve the actual problem. Sometimes you can do that and it's okay, you don't really realize. But in our case, it was clear, like we even set up the wrong KPI because we weren't focusing on the right user group. And then it was so shocking. It was just so shocking for everybody, because we really, I'll speak for myself, part of my persona, and I believe it, is that I listen to users, is that I'm open and receptive and I can follow the trail. And there was something in this story after so many years of working that was such a blow. But as you said, we took those learnings and we put in place strategies to make sure that whenever we approach something, we are aware of where we're coming from. We are aware of our biases. We are aware of our internal drivers. And once you're aware, you can then put in place tools to make sure you don't go to those pitfalls.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to go into every situation with a hefty dose of humility. I quite often think about some of the amazing mistakes I've made along the way and try and remember those as I'm going in, just to really keep me honest with things. So, Erica, how do you sort of make sure that your teams are sort of, making sure that they're not taking biases into experiments and, making sure that they're testing hypotheses rather than trying to prove assumptions, if you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think our team and Microsoft in general, the culture is to acknowledge that you are biased and that's part of it, that you can't erase all your bias, but you should be aware of them. And you don't know how many you have or that you don't. I think one thing that we've been digging into a lot is David Dylan Thomas's book, Design for Cognitive Bias. I think that's a wonderful resource that I would recommend to everyone. It's chock full of biases that I didn't even know about. And so it's to be humble every step of the way, like you said, to just check yourself every step of the way. It's really important. I think it is humbling. And I think in that way, it's great. I'm thinking of teams in the past that were very ego driven about I'm right, I'm going to prove I'm right. That's garbage. You don't want to work that way. And it's all about the customer. And you are not your customer. Even if you use your products that your company makes, you're not everyone. And so you have to think of the customer all the time. And we always check ourselves. And I think our Teams chats, they're chock full of, hold on a minute, wait a minute, stop and think. That if you're moving really, really fast, which we like to do at big companies like Microsoft, we want to get things done, we want to accomplish things and make business impact, but we have to slow ourselves down a little bit and not move too quickly, so we can check those boxes to make sure we're not making mistakes. And I think when you're doing usability testing, when you're talking to customers, every minute is an opportunity to slow down a little bit and think and be more careful and cognizant about bias. It's everywhere, every minute of the day.
Definitely. And it's interesting as well when you're talking to customers. One of the things I very, very much enjoy about customer research is actually trying to read through their implicit biases and the way that they see the world and try and understand the world from their viewpoint. And that's what I find fascinating about the whole role. Gubby, what about you as well with bias? How do you make sure that, that biases aren't coming into the data that you collect? You've obviously done a lot of data analytics over the years.
From my perspective as an operations professional, I'm thinking about who are you including in your studies in terms of diversity in recruiting. And so one of the practices, or I guess learnings that came out of the exercise towards putting together this customer research privacy training was coming together and figuring out like, who do we want to participate in our studies, and who were we talking to, and then how do we increase that diverse pool of folks. But when you do that, when you ask that question, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that we have around the kinds of questions we might want to ask folks in research, and especially who you're including. And that may be personally identifiable information, or it might be sensitive information. And so you want to increase as much choice as possible for your participants in being able to answer those questions. And so whether or not they want to be included in your study, whether or not they want to be, how do they want their data handled? And so there's this process that we went through, and some learnings around what kinds of questions were we asking before they're entering into studies, and do we need to have any additional practices in place around handling data more responsibly? And that was an exercise that we did. We broke up the questions around the purpose of the study, as well as why are we asking these questions? Do we need to be asking these questions? And then how are we giving the participants choice around especially around sensitive data, and answering those questions, giving them options and letting them know how we're treating data. And I would say that actually led to us creating trainings and making sure that we have platforms and tools in place so that we can ethically and responsibly deal with data.
Yeah, definitely. And if people haven't seen it, your talk was all about, you know, baking privacy into customer research experiments. So I know I shouted out at the beginning, but yet another shout out, make sure you go check out that talk in the recordings if you can. It was very interesting as well. So yeah. What about you in terms of privacy and sort of trying to make sure that you know, we're obviously very, you know, we hold on to lots of customer data when we're doing processes in place and training in place for your groups around that area?
So we do have actually our organization is we have a big legal team that advises us on many issues. Part of that is how we collect data and what we can keep, and you know what type of analysis we can actually do. So, for example, you know, we've used ClickTail in the past, so we had stored, you know, recordings. So, you know, we do our best so we don't collect any PII. But if something slipped through, then of course we would erase it. When we do surveys, or, you know, when we do outreach for user research, it also goes through our legal team. So there's a lot of back and forth regarding what we ask and how we ask, and it's to make sure that you know, we have to collect enough information in order for it to be meaningful, but we don't want to collect too much information, so it's not, you know, people don't want to give just information, and we don't want to collect information that we can't hold. So there's definitely a lot of teamwork from different departments. So not everything can be as fast as we want it to be, but in order to make sure that we comply with everything that we need to comply with.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Erica, I know I used to be at Microsoft, so I've seen all the videos about Nelson and Microsoft Builds on Trust. So I know for a fact that sort of privacy is baked into kind of Microsoft standards of business conduct training and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's top of mind for everyone. We don't want to lose our customers' trust. And I think that's one thing that Microsoft stands for front and center is customer privacy. It's super important. Yeah.
Now the title of this panel is all about iterating success towards success, Erica. And I was really taken by the ways in which, you know, you were using customer research to learn more quickly without having to do sort of full A/B tests in production. So I'd be interested if you can, you know, the message you had around not getting too hung up on statistical significance, it's easy for me to say, was really interesting. So do you want to recap that a little bit? And then we've got a question from the audience that I kind of want to take in as well. So yeah, if you recap that first.
Yeah, I think I get on a bit of a soapbox about it because I think A/B testing, A/B experimentation, to be more precise, can really slow down an organization. It's great to be confident in your results, but I've seen that the content research or the content testing that I dive into in my presentation can help could bring velocity to your work. I think A/B experiments, I think I joked that we're not creating the next COVID vaccine, we're working on content. It's important to be customer-centric, but we don't need necessarily to be super, super precise and get to statistical significance with our work in some cases. I mean, if you have a homepage and you're worried about making a change to a really high value piece of content, go for it. I think that people like to bandy about the term, though. It makes them sound important. It makes them feel scientific. My brother's a statistician, so maybe I have an interesting point of view about it. He is a professor and he teaches statistics for a psychology department. Content, if you're getting directional data, sometimes that's enough. And hurry up, make your content better and get it in front of the customer faster. I think A/B experiments, I've seen them slow down teams and just get people all bent out of shape about, well, we're almost at statistical significance, we're not there yet. And they make experiments cook for longer. And then, another month goes by, and just hurry it up. Hurry up is how I feel if you are confident that you're getting to a direction that's right. And I think content research, which we do with Zoom, usertesting.com, can get you there faster. I mean, there is a time and a place for statistical significance and A/B experimentation or multivariate experimentation. I did it all day long when I worked at Amazon. It's very valuable, but in some cases it will turn into this molassesy goop and slow down your org. So there's, I think bring a big use your judgment, and don't use the term without knowing what you're doing.
A question from the audience is, how do you kind of strike that balance between, slowing down, as we said before, to check biases, but then, like you say, ensuring you go fast as well and don't get caught in analysis paralysis? Like how do we strike that balance?
Know your customer really well. Know the customers that you're focusing on, so you can tune out the noise. I think, for example, if I am not sure of the right word for a new product, I will test a few examples with user testing or user Zoom, so I'm confident, okay, if I had five contenders, if you will, I can put those examples in front of my audience and get feedback very quickly with a tool like user testing or user Zoom to get 2 or 3, to get the ones that bubble up to the top, to know what those are, and then put those into A/B experimentation or retest. If you had 10 options and then boil it down to 5 and then boil it down to 3, figure out what the winners are. And that's by testing the words themselves. I think if you can decouple words from prototypes or visuals, you can get a lot of information very quickly. Not to say that prototype testing isn't valuable, it certainly is. Our teams do it all the time, but I think if you are looking for the right words, you can test the words, do research on the words only. And that is so simple sounding, but can be revolutionary in the way that you approach your work. And
right, sort of constrain the scope. Yeah.
Yes,
right.
Yes, and you can chunk it down. I think these tools, they like user test and user Zoom, they're super helpful, but I also want to throw out that they sometimes they can help you move too fast, that you want to make sure that your tests are structured in a way that reduce bias. And so again, I think we're trying to run, but I have actually I'm working on a book about this, the very topic. So maybe this time next year I can throw a book at y'all. But if I think user testing has a lot of resources on its website that I find super valuable for checking bias, but at the same time speeding up the process and making things easier. And I think the more you do that, the more your judgment, the more confident you get in yourself, in your ability to say, this is the right direction, or not going there.
Makes sense. Guppy, what do you think about this as well? Have you any tips for the audience on, iterating and speeding up as well as doing it carefully?
Well, I think the last point that you made there, Eric, around increasing confidence, the piece, just being able to build in trainings for when you, like, there's a lot of, we all wear different hats, right? And sometimes we're getting asked to do research or a little bit of just moderation or note taking or these extra things. And so increasing the confidence of the people that are doing these new tasks, but increase, building and training, I think would building that education piece up front. And so building that confidence and that muscle to be able to then iterate faster, so that there's not this fear of here, I'm doing something new, taking on this lightweight feedback session or taking notes in this session, and what data considerations should I have in mind. But when you have that training, you have that knowledge bank to be able to go to and going, okay, I have that information now. I'm not floating in the sea of not knowing what it is that I should be mindful of. I think that builds confidence, and then that increases speed and productivity as well.
Yep. And what about you, Yael? What about you for any tips on iterating, on speeding up things, and making sure you don't get caught up in analysis paralysis when you're checking the biases?
So it definitely resonated what was said earlier about the reaching statistical significance. Sometimes it's, you can see the direction, like go. You have to have judgment, also, and sometimes just let it go. And also, we also do tests that are just copy versus, decoupling it. So you're really sure. And we found that changing the copy itself is really significant. Can just a word change can be really impactful. I do want to talk about how to quickly figure out if you have bias and how to mitigate it. There are simple things that people can put, like create new habits that can just help you with your day-to-day. So then it doesn't become, oh, how do I do this? How do I figure it out? It's just, it becomes a routine. And I think for someone that's in research, it's really important. So for example, when I start a project, I check in with myself and I write down, do I have any preconceptions about the user group that I'm now speaking to? Had I done this with my example, I would have realized, but I didn't. Do I have any preconceptions about the area that I'm testing? Do I already think I know what the problem is and what the solution is? And writing it down proves to me if I have it or not. It's just a tool, and then keep going back to it. So it's not a big, like dramatic thing that you have to take time about. It's just make sure that you take the 5-10 minutes to listen to yourself, write down what you really already have as your narrative, your existing narratives, and then throughout the projects, go back to it. Just every week, just go, oh, now I remember. So this is what I need to make sure I avoid. Of course, there are other techniques that I shared in the presentation, but I think that raising awareness that we're all human, as Erica said, we all have biases. So there's no, we can't. I know someone once told me, well, if I write it down, doesn't it make it like I give it power? And my response was, well, if you not acknowledging doesn't make it go away. Like just by raising the awareness, that's the only way you can then sort of figure out how to avoid it. So just a few minutes every time before you engage with the user group, just think, do I have anything? Any defensiveness, any ego that I'm bringing in, and that just by acknowledging, you can then start releasing that and being more objective.
That's fantastic advice. And that's definitely something, learned from my days doing DevOps and things. If you're not good at something, if you find it painful, then do it again. Just keep doing it until it stops hurting. You know what I mean? And then you'll get better at it. You will build the muscles to be able to do this over and over. So I think we probably need to start, gosh, really, this is flown by. We probably need to start wrapping up, but we'll go around one more time. Before we do, I just want to thank everybody again for their time and everyone that's been following along. As I said at the start, I just really appreciated the real stories of lessons that you've all learned, and there were some great sessions, and you've all been open and sharing about them even when they were painful. So thanks on behalf of everybody watching at home. Thanks very much. Just as we are wrapping up, I was wondering if you had any last thoughts or tips on how people can iterate more quickly themselves. What small steps can the people at home take tomorrow or next week or next month to improve how they do user research, improve how they handle data? So Guppy, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, on the question around how to handle data, I mean, I'm really excited about knocking on my cross-functional partners' doors and trying to get out of our silos that sometimes we get into working on our specific teams, and asking, knock on your privacy office's door and ask for help. And what are they working on? How can you collaborate? Just that simple knock will and build a partnership potentially into something that might help your customers in big and better ways. And so I think that being collaborative and taking a step and saying, hey, what are you working on? Hey, how can we partner and make our product development process even better, and being able to collaborate. And I think is just a simple step around, like, never know where you can build a partnership or a connection in your own company.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. And this week's definitely told us that we're not on our own. So it's been a great week for that. Erica, what about you? Any tips for the folks at home, what we should do tomorrow, next week, next month?
Yeah, I would say for content research, my favorite tool is visualthesaurus.com. If you're wondering what words to throw into a test, it's I think it's $20 a year for subscription, but it has verbs, adjectives, adverbs. It's just, if you don't know what words to come up with for a content test, Visual Thesaurus is a great place to start. And I'd say, to add on to what Guppy said, making friends across your company, I think about my colleagues around the world, that I am in Seattle, I am a white woman, I am 50 years old, I am biased. And if the more I can get input from my colleagues around the world in different countries, in different cultures, the better the customer experience will be. And so I'd say that's another humbling moment of working in UX, is not solving for yourself, but getting input from all over, being transparent and welcoming that input all the time is important.
Yeah, fantastic. And then last but not least, Yael, what about you? Any tips to the audience in the last minute we've got?
So I'm going to echo what Guppy and Erica said, just from a different point of view. So I think there's many times researchers do work in silo, and there's a lack of leveraging the information already available in the organization. And one thing that we've really emphasized this year is bringing in these other perspectives. So it's other perspectives, not just from, where the people are situated and what their background is, but from other teams. So we've really started leveraging, my example was us not leveraging the customer service team. So we've now moved to the complete opposite, and they're involved in our research planning and we share everything, and not with the management, but of course with the management, but also with the actual reps. And we've brought in the technical team and QA, and that's just widened our perspective so much, not just on how the organization works, but understanding our users in much more depth than we did before. And I think that the research has really benefited from it. The ideas, and also the breadth of ideas, and also the granularity of what we're actually testing and what the problem is. So
Fantastic.
You're not on your own. Like, much knowledge in the organization, just tap into it.
Fabulous. Well, we'll leave it at that. You're not on your own, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope you've been having a great UXDX so far. Enjoy your next session. We'll hand you back to Rory. Thank you very much.